book. I mean, there's a whole, I think, chapter 10, chapter 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there where we're talking about, I mean, we kind of simplify things, I think, when we talk about the protein or carbohydrates, but if we're really focusing on eating, you know, in a balanced way, we're understanding that by focusing on that one thing, it kind of puts everything else in the right order as well. And so if we're understanding why is it that this is having more of an impact in my middle than maybe other things that I've done before, and we can come back to the insulin, why is it that I'm feeling better, why, you know, and that they're understanding. It's just the opportunity. As they're having success, it's an opportunity for them to understand why it is that the 5-in-1 is working and why it is that they're going to be able to mimic that with the others. So everybody ultimately does want to get some very specific information about what the transition looks like. And I have to say that most people, when they're getting close to transition and maintenance, they are starting to get nervous. It's funny because in the beginning they're worried that they're going to have to eat the food forever, and about the time that they get here, they're scared they're going to have to give it up. Right?
That's true.
So, and actually, I think that's kind of was Allison's experience. So, Allison and her husband Scott, I coached. And actually, would you kind of share with them two things you mentioned to me about your fear, and then also the decision that y'all made about how to approach transition. If you'll
Okay. Scott, I finished the program I got done with the weight loss phase before my husband, but I was afraid to transition without him. So I kept going a little while longer until he was done with weight loss because we'd done the whole thing together, and I wanted to finish strong with my husband. I was just scared to have a shaky fork with a carrot on it or something on my side. So I waited, and we transitioned together, and he was kind of looking through the information about how to do it, and he said, you know, I'm kind of ready to fast track this a little bit and want to get moving, and I was a health coach at this time already, and I just said to him that, you know, we had followed every rule, every protocol, and done what we were supposed to do the whole time. And I said, you know, it seems like of all times to continue to do what we're supposed to do, transition is where it's at. Like that's where we should really continue to be compliant. First of all, because I want to make sure it goes smoothly and I do it properly and the weight doesn't come back, but also because I want to be able to speak to that when I'm coaching my clients. It's really important that you're transitioning properly. So we decided to do that, and I'm not joking, when I finally ever had a carrot or potato, it took a really, really long time for me to do that again. The fork is shaking because, you know, we were saying we're not going to keep ordering food when we first got started, and then I don't want to do that. When it was time to do it, it was scary to try those other things, but we followed the protocol and we introduced things in the timeline that was suggested, and we did beautifully. It worked really well.
So, and I think that I think that's pretty typical. I don't know about you all, but I hear that fear coming out. I mean, when somebody's really made a transition with their weight and they've had past experiences or whatever where they have regained the weight, then they're nervous about that. So I think that's one of the value of having the very specific protocol. And again, that's something that I do introduce early on, is that there's a very specific way that we're going to carry you through transition, because when they ask the question, am I going to gain the weight back? That's what I can speak to, is that we're going to go through that process. Now, if they have become disconnected with me, I'm hoping that they're coming back to me at this point. I mean, because people are really, you know, they've got the swing of things, they're losing weight, they've got it. But when they get back to this point, hopefully we're going to have an opportunity to briefly re-engage with them. And so I do try to let them know early on. It's like, make sure you give me a call when you're ready to transition, because they might say, I think I'm only a couple of weeks away, or something like that. So at this point, and this is how I refer to this, it's like we've got greater freedom now, but we've got greater responsibility. In a lot of ways, there's a lot more learning that needs to take place right here than there was to get started on the 5-in-1. And so so I let people know that, not to necessarily expect this to be easy, but we're going to take it week by week. And so the first week, and this is kind of the nitty-gritty of the details, it's all right in the books, guys, but the first 4 weeks of transition are going to look the same for everybody. It's based upon how much weight you lost will determine how long you stay here in the week 4 range of the program. So week 1, we're not going to reduce the amount of Medifast meals, so we're still doing 5 of the Medifast meals, but we're adding 1 serving, or it could even be like 2 servings of vegetables, but we're adding an additional vegetable to the program, and that can be something that's not on the green list. Yay. So there's your freedom. But this, again, and sharing with people that you're going to add a healthy vegetable that you know is full of vitamins and nutrients, but maybe you've really been missing, like carrots or sweet potatoes. And then the second week of the program, they're going to reduce by 1 Medifast meal. And now I'm explaining to them that they're actually replacing a fueling. They're still going to eat 6 times a day. So they've got to replace the fueling. Now, once they have reduced the Medifast meal, they've also reduced a little bit of protein, so there's some room for adding some protein. And this is what I have them do that doesn't spell all that out. I think that's where it gets a little confusing, because I don't have anybody having a fueling, or encourage people not to have a fueling without combining that with the protein. So whatever that combined with the fruit might be, whether it's some almonds or whether it's yogurt, it might be cottage cheese, egg, a boiled egg, something like that. So here we are, we've added fruit, and now we're down by 1 Medifast meal. Third week, we're staying at the same 4 Medifast fuelings. We're having 2 other fuelings that aren't Medifast fuelings. And now we can add the dairy into that. So when we talked about the cheese and the stuff like that, I mean, so if it gets a little out of order, we're not going to get too upset. But understand, it's going to depend on the individual too. Some people are going to see this chart and it has got to be exactly like this. So a few people, that's the minority. But and then we've got the 4th week of transition is where we're adding whole grain. We've reduced now our Medifast meals to 3. And this is really where we're at with the 3 and 3 plan. And some people will choose really to always utilize those 3 Medifast meals. And I see a lot of success with people that are doing that. And then they've now got the 4 other food group categories in here. I have to tell you, I give my clients a big warning in the whole grain and really encourage them early on in transition for that whole grain to not be a serving of bread. I just think that it's hard to find good quality bread at the store, and so depending on what their source is, but I just encourage them to use a whole food, whole grain. So whether it's whole grain rice or whatever that is, but to avoid the processed whole grain foods early on. Yeah.
Okay, how about the Ezekiel bread and the rye and the pumpernickel, and are those okay? Or
I think there are some of them that are okay. I think it's just hard for us to know which ones have a little rye added and which ones are really rye bread.
Yeah, the sprouted green breads are really the best choice to start with, I think.
Ezekiel.
Like Ezekiel.
Like Ezekiel, that's just the brand. But the sprouted grain breads that are really no flour, they're high in protein. There's so much nutritional value, so it's doing the same thing as a Medifast bar if you couple it also with protein.
Exactly.
It's nutritional value.
Isn't the reason because they're when the carb is actually encoded and it's a lot harder to break down?
Yeah, it's
not refined.
As soon as you grind like the hull of the wheat,
You break it open.
as soon as you do that, every day it loses nutritional value, and the protein is gone for the most part, because that's where it is. It's in the hull. So a piece of wheat can keep its nutritional value for hundreds of years, as long as the hull is not cracked and then turned into a flour. So there's a lot of it's packed full of value, nutritional value.
What about sourdough bread?
They have it on the list in Dr. Anderson's book as one of the lower glycemic. Yeah, but I don't know about the quality, and again, finding the breads that it's...
Well, by then we know how to read a nutritional label, and we know how to look for better balance in our foods. And the nice thing about the Ezekiel or the sprouted green breads is that, you know what, by that time, they taste good. They never was that before, but they taste good now, and you can taste the nuttiness in it.
And appreciate it.
Yes.
So again, what you were saying was you were warning them against doing it too early, though.
I warn it too early because I think that it's the area where they can get into trouble the most, or where I've seen that. If once they think they're going to have a sandwich for lunch every day, they seem to start getting into a little bit of trouble there. So, so that's the warning. The TEE, is a calculation that can be done. It's the total energy expenditure. To me, a very complicated calculation. Alice's husband created a little formula that we can plug in online. I think Nutritional Services will help you calculate your TEE as well. This is the thing that I always go back to. I mean, some people really want to know, and I don't think it's a bad thing to know, but I really think that if you eat in a very balanced way, you don't have to count calories.
You're right.
And you can get a balance going because you're incrementally increasing things, and you're going to understand. Early on, we talk about monitoring our weight. I recommend once a week. When someone's in maintenance, a lot of times we'll encourage them to do every day, just to make sure that they don't get into trouble, and especially going through transitioning, because they can see a lot of people that are really doing transition properly will lose weight early on, even for the first week and even sometimes the second week in transition. I have these down here. They are some of the guidelines that are given in one of the resource books. But the thing is that if once we're at this point and we're looking at about a 1,500 calorie, I think is where you end up with just where you've gone from week 1 through week 4. Just keep in mind that you want to have a balance of foods, and that kind of brings us back to Dr. Anderson's the 9-inch plate method of eating. But so you're eating a variety from the different food groups, and then the reason I put this here is because I do find that a lot of people have a tendency as they start adding things on, they've gotten really used to their sparse meals early in the day, and then they do that lean and green, that really big lean and green at dinner. And I find that people just keep adding on to their lean and green, and so we want to make sure that they're increasing their calorie count earlier in the day. And I'm spreading that out throughout the day. I always refer, so glycemic index charts in chapter 9, we can, first week they can look at the vegetables. Second week they can look at the fruit and understand, again it talks about the fat and stuff like that for the dairy and all of that. So it can be a very gradual, they don't have to learn this all at one time. And,
I think Ron said the calorie, he used, your weight time, your ideal weight times 11 is the number of calories. And then if you exercise, and I guess, maybe...
a simplified way to...
Simplify that.
To not have to do the
It seems to work, and then if you exercise at 20%.
Well, you can, if they have a chart in Habits of Health, you can add, like for moderate or...
Right, but that's
For
part
the
of
activity factor that is included in the TEE. But if there's any question about where you end up here, if somebody's really working out like crazy and they have a high calorie, energy need, then this is where, from here, that's where they're headed. They're gradually increasing calorie count and incorporating the different food groups and going to balance out there.
The thing that I've learned in regard to that too is it's figuring that number out, being specific about it, can be very helpful as you move from a healthy weight to being more fit. Right. Because as you gain muscle, and you can gain weight in muscle, but if your base caloric rate it has increased by 500 calories, then that's okay.
Right.
That balance has to continue as you move from being at a healthy weight to becoming fit.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking, because it doesn't have a TE, it seems high to me. It seems like a high number of calories.
I have thought that before, too.
Whenever I figured it out, I was like, this doesn't make sense. And so,
how am I ever going to get there in a healthy way?
It's like, it just seemed like a high number of calories, but maybe it is incorporating that level of exercise.
And I think that if people are really sticking to the healthy foods,
right.
It's going to be fine. They're keeping their blood sugar balance to get to the calorie level.
Right.
And the other value to me of calculating this is for people to understand the impact that the activity level will have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's something that they can still change, especially if they want the number to be bigger. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's.
Yeah. So then I think this is just going to remind you of some of the things that I share, and that is to make sure that people understand